Today on FT Monthly, I break down Project 25, why it's so scary and why Trump is running from it. And should he be? I also consider the recent hubbub over a book called Shepherds for Sale. And finally, let's talk about what it means to be pro-life in theory and in practice, and why those two sometimes look like they're at odds with each other. That and more on this month's FT Monthly. Well, I hope your summer went well. It went like crazy fast for me, but we got all our kids in school and we're getting back into the swing of things. In fact, recently we had a storm blow through our neighborhood and it took out part of our fence. And well, luckily we have fantastic neighbors. One put up a snow fence, the other one just kind of letting our dog run wild in their yard. Although our dog's getting into something there. We got to figure that out. But we want prices to kind of stabilize before we fix it. So it's kind of sitting there. So hopefully you are not as blown away by the weather this summer as Omaha has been. We've had some difficult bouts with weather. But you're not here to hear me grouse on about the weather. You're here to talk about our top three. So let's get into it. All right, well, FreeThinking Ministries' mission statement is this. It's equipping the curious to reason together by applying logic and sound theology to all aspects of life. Now, every now and then, we branch out of our common conversations to cover something a bit more ministry-specific. Last year, if you remember, we discussed a ministry and the gospel with a local dance troupe called Evergreen here in Omaha, Nebraska. In fact, if you missed that interview, I would love for you to watch that. You can click on it. It'll be in the description below today. But today I want to talk about another ministry, and this ministry is one that I've been aware of for a long time. In 2008, I first entered the pastorate. I was able to participate in youth ministry and things of that nature. And as I entered into the pastorate, I was exposed to something called Operation Christmas Child. And for those of you who don't know, Operation Christmas Child is a ministry of Samaritan's Purse that goes around and gives Christmas gifts out to kids around the world. And it was awesome. We were able to pack shoe boxes, take our kids to go pack shoe boxes. It was really, really cool. So there's going to be info on Operation Christmas Child in the description. But instead of just hearing me talk about it, I thought it would be great to have a conversation with with a couple of people in the Omaha area that are very, very intimately involved with the ministry. And the reason we want to do that this early, it's like, it's August. What are we talking about Operation Christmas Child for? Well, you got to order, you got to get things ready to go. You got to, you got to shop and get things ready to go. Well, we need to get the word out as soon as possible. So if you've never heard of Operation Christmas Child, I encourage you to listen to this interview that I had with John and Holly Mayo. Check it out. So excited to have my friends John and Holly Mayo with me. We've known each other for like 16 years, I think we discussed at the beginning here, so it's been a while. I was an assistant pastor at the church they attended, and now we just kind of keep in contact through Facebook. It's one of the good things that Facebook is used for. There's a lot of bad things Facebook is used for, but we're able to keep in contact that way. And they're supporters of the ministry. They've been able to support us financially and through prayer, and they do awesome stuff with ministry, both in church and with parachurch ministry, and that's what we're here to talk about today. We're talking about something called Operation Christmas Child, something that was really big when I was at Benson Baptist, which is where you guys are still, right? And it's still built really big in the nation and in Omaha. So tell us a little bit about that for people who don't know what Operation Christmas Child is, and then we'll get kind of into a journey you guys went on recently.
Okay. The short answer to what Operation Christmas Child is it is an evangelistic ministry. We're all about bringing the gospel to children between the ages of 2 and 14. The longer explanation is that it is a ministry of Samaritan's Purse. It provides training in materials for gospel outreach and also discipleship outreach, and probably the most well-known portion of it is the shoebox itself. We encourage people to pack shoe boxes that are fun, full, and personal, and those are distributed to kids around the world.
Yeah, so and you guys were able to be part of the distribution process recently, right?
Correct.
Yeah, so tell us about that. Where did you guys go? What was that like? Because I've seen videos of it, obviously. Some people haven't. You can look even Operation Christmas Child up on YouTube, I think.
Right.
There's plenty of videos. Right. So tell us about where did you go and what was that like?
Yeah, we had an opportunity to go to Ecuador at the end of May, 1st of June-ish, and it was exciting after 20-some years of being involved with the ministry to be able to go over there and see the ministry in action, to see that it actually does work as they tell us it works.
That's important. Yeah.
And it was just, the kids were excited to see us and very welcoming. It was just a really great experience.
And you mentioned videos online. If you go to SamaritansPurse.org/OCC, go down to videos, and there's over 500 videos connected with Operation Christmas Child there.
Yeah, so you can really get a good feel of what it looks like and what is actually being accomplished there. Now, when I was part of it, they put a little booklet in each box so that kids would know who Jesus is. So it's not just they get gifts, right? But a little booklet. So tell us a little bit about the booklets that they put in here.
Yeah, so at each event, the children are sat down in a room.
Yeah, here, I'll take it.
From boy to girl to 2 to 14 years old. And before they're given a shoebox, the gospel message is presented with a full-size flip chart. And then they're handed this book, which is what they get to take home, which is, again, the gospel message, but it's their personal copy.
Oh, that is awesome. And it says it in their own language, right?
Exactly,
So you're not
yes.
having to work through translators necessarily. You might have some of them might not be able to read, but they can find someone to read it to them,
Right.
right? And so that's awesome.
Yeah, an important component, at least in my view, is that it's the local church doing the ministry.
Yes.
It isn't Americans or people from outside the country going in and doing the ministry. We support the local church in the country, and we've been into 170 different countries, and the material has been translated into 107 different languages.
Wow. Okay, say that again. 170 different countries.
170 different countries, and the material has been translated into 107 languages.
So that's awesome. So we live in a politically charged world, and I talk a lot. That's kind of what I do. I talk a lot about that stuff, which is great, and Americans need that. But I think the church in America also needs to be reminded that there are people outside those borders that desperately need to hear the gospel, and this is one of those non-political entities that says, "Hey, we're gospel-driven. That's what we do. We don't care about who's the president. We don't care about whatever. We're just going to go and we're going to share the gospel with people, with kids, and give them hope." Right?
Absolutely. And it's probably one of my favorite things about it is I work with churches from all different faith histories, and they're all about sharing the gospel. And so I just love that, just having the body of Christ coming together to share the love of God.
Yeah. So we call it theological triage. Like, hey, you might get a Presbyterian, a Baptist, and a Lutheran all together. Yeah. We all believe in the same Jesus. We're going to go and we're going to share it.
There was 60-some people on our trip, and none of that was ever an issue. We were all just there working to reach children for Christ.
Yeah, that is awesome. Were you able to see any of those stories kind of play out while you were there, or you're laughing? So
Yeah.
Every day.
Okay, yeah.
Every day. I'll let you share first if you want to share about the little girl.
I had a little girl at our first event. It was at the end of the event, and the kids were getting ready to leave. And one of the leaders tapped me on the shoulder, and she said, "This little girl wants to take her picture with you." And so I knelt down and put my arm around her, and we took her picture. And then she curled into me and just wrapped her arms around me, gave me this biggest hug. And of course, I started bawling.
Yeah.
And I don't know her name because I was overwhelmed.
Yeah.
But I will pray for her forever.
And that's the sort of connection that we make in the body of Christ when we do that sort of thing, where I always tell people, if you, as a Christian, never have gone on an overseas trip of any sort, not just Operation Christmas Child, but if you've never done that, that should be something that you try to do as a believer, because it really takes you out of your bubble and puts you into the fact that you can go to Ecuador, you can go to Quito. Shout out to Raul, my brother-in-law, who's from Quito, Ecuador. Maybe he'll watch this, and maybe he would have known some of those kids. I don't know. Quito's kind of a big city, so anyway, you can go there, and it's amazing because when you go to the church, one of my favorite things is you immediately have a family connection with them. Like you don't speak the same language,
Right.
but you speak the same language
Yeah.
because you're both believers.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So did you experience that with the churches there? There's just like this wanting to bring you in and just,
Oh,
yeah.
Yeah, they loved on us. They just, we were there just to see the ministry. We weren't actually there to participate, but they included us. They, even though they were speaking Spanish and we were speaking English, they just wanted us to be part of there and feel welcomed. And they were so thankful for what we did in the United States to bring shoe boxes, and we're so thankful for what they're doing, reaching out to kids. It was just fantastic.
Yeah, so this is a good example of the body of Christ working together across all boundaries, and just, Philippians says we're not citizens of this earth, we're citizens of heaven.
Right.
And so I think Operation Christmas Child is a great example of what it means like to be a part of the citizenship of heaven across all country boundaries, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about what you encourage people in the States to do. Like, what can people do? Maybe there's a few different ways they can pack a box or whatever it is. In Omaha, some people will be watching this in Omaha. So talk a little bit about how people can get involved if this is the first time they're hearing about it, or if they've been like hesitant because they're not sure. There's some organizations that
Absolutely.
you just, sometimes they're underhanded, and you're going, I don't know anything about it. So now that they're starting to say, hey, I might want to get involved with this, what are different ways people can get involved?
All right. First and foremost, pray. Nothing gets done without God's power, and so we want people to pray. Then the next step is simply to pack a shoebox. If they want to know how to pack a shoebox, they can go on SamaritansPurse.org/OCC, and there's information on how to pack shoeboxes there. And then other ways that they can get involved if they want to go a little bit deeper is to encourage groups to pack shoeboxes. We're always wanting to get church groups to pack shoeboxes, community groups, student groups, just any kind of group that wants to be involved in sharing the love of God with children. And then past that, they can do short-term volunteer opportunities, either with like the local drop-offs in their area, or they can go to regional distribution centers where they can see these millions of shoeboxes come in and get prayed over. They are examined for potential items that would interfere with them getting through customs, and then they're shipped out to around the world. And then if they want to go even deeper year-round, there's opportunities called Connect Volunteers, which is one of the things that Holly and I do. We're Connect Volunteers, but there are Connect Volunteers that just focus on prayer, focus on outreach to church groups, community groups, student groups, and then there's logistics volunteers that help get their church involved as a drop-off center, and then they actually help collect boxes from their community.
Oh, so that was a lot.
Yes,
so,
it was.
So here's what we'll do. We will put in that link into the description of the video or the audio podcast where everybody's somebody listen. You can just scroll down to the description, click on that link. It will take you directly to all that information. There's a lot of stuff you can get involved in. We're talking 170 countries, right? And so I think there were 204 countries that participated in the Olympics.
Right.
So that's almost every country. That's almost every country.
Yeah. It's one of the big focuses now is reaching unreached people groups, which by our definition is groups that contain less than 1% Christians. And so that's a huge focus. We want everyone in the world to hear. And so
that's
the
awesome.
whole world hears.
That's awesome. There might be some places in America that fit that right now. That's neither here nor there. That's neither here nor there. So you guys have been involved for how long with Operation Christmas Child? Can you even think? It was before I knew you, I'm pretty sure. So
we think the Benson Baptist Church, well, we know Benson Baptist Church was the first drop-off location in the state of Nebraska.
Wow.
And we think that was about 27 years ago now. So,
Yeah.
so I've been involved at least that long, and then I drug him in about 5 years ago. We became the area coordinators here.
John was voluntold.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. So for the first 21 years, I was voluntold, and now I volunteer.
Yeah. There you go. So almost 3 decades in Nebraska.
Correct.
Almost probably at least 2 decades where you guys have been intimately involved in the things that are going on. And it's a ministry that just continues to grow. But there's more opportunity for growth, right?
Absolutely. So sort of the tagline within the organization is evangelism, discipleship, and multiplication. So we're always looking to multiply. And part of that is we want more shoeboxes, not just because they're shoeboxes, because they're gospel opportunities. In the course of the 30 years of the ministry, they've collected 220 million shoeboxes. And so that represents each child of 220 million who have heard the gospel through the ministry of the local church being supported by Operation Christmas Child. And out of that, over 20 million decisions for Christ.
Wow.
Last year alone, there was 2.6 million decisions.
Praise God.
Absolutely.
Praise God for that.
Highest power.
And so we want to be in prayer for those kids and their discipleship.
Yes. Yes.
And that's why the local church in that area is so important.
Right.
Because there's groups that are going to come and hand out boxes, and that's great. You're going to get good hugs, and you're going to have a connection. But that local church is needing to be invested in as well.
And every child that receives a shoebox is invited back for a 12-week discipleship program called The Greatest Journey. This is an example of the book that is used for that. And so Operation Christmas Child...
Put it in front of Holly's face.
Operation Christmas Child trains volunteers from the local church how to use this material to help disciple the children. So we don't want to just leave the children out on their own. We want to have them make a connection. We were at a worship event on Sunday that had done an outreach event the year before. And
While we were in Ecuador.
Yeah, while we were my apologies. While we were in Ecuador, we were at a church that had done an outreach event the year before. And there was a young girl by the name of Rosita that came up to me after worship service and said, "Thank you for helping me know Jesus."
Wow.
And my initial reaction, I didn't do that. This is what this church did. But then it was like God said, "Oh, no, it's okay. You're a proxy for every person that's ever packed a shoebox. And she's a proxy for every child that has heard about Jesus and it accepted him."
That's so beautiful. Just that connection of the hope.
Right.
I mean, wherever we live right now, whether it's the United States, it's Ecuador, it's other places, the world is spiraling into a lot of hopelessness.
Absolutely.
Everywhere. In Omaha, Nebraska, where we are, there's a lot of hopelessness here, and the only true hope is the gospel of Jesus Christ.
Absolutely.
That's what we want to talk about at FreeThinking Ministries, and that's what, in another way, Operation Christmas Child is doing as well. Some things that people might ask is, do like the same kids get the shoeboxes every year? Do they move locations? What does that look like on a regular basis?
Yeah, so the ministry is very intentional about one box, one child. And so that's why that's why we pack from the age of 2 to 14. And so then, we were at a church that had, in 30 years, this was only their third distribution because they try to wait and cycle through as the next age group of kids comes through.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so, I think it's just an important question to wrap our minds around. It's like, okay, how are we diversifying this? And it wouldn't be bad if the same kids were getting things every year, but the fact that when you hear that 2 million number, when you hear that 20 million number, it's because there's a specific strategy that's going on. So one of the things that we like to talk about in ministry is God works spontaneously, but also through preparation.
Absolutely.
And this is the preparation and the planning, and then you see God all of a sudden is doing things in that. And so it's a very strategic ministry. It's not just fly by the seat of their pants. They've been doing it for decades and decades now, and it's a very important one to check out.
And just to go off of what you were saying, part of that multiplication is that spontaneous action of God. Operation Christmas Child isn't in the business of planting churches, but because so many people are coming to God, there was over 1,000 churches planted last year because of this growth in Christians.
That's amazing. And it's also a testament to you pick your mission and you focus on that mission and say, we're not going to do everything. God's going to take care of the church. The church is being built. God's going to take care of some of the other things. We're going to focus on our mission statement. And that's so important for any ministry in any church. Yes. Sometimes we try to be all things. Right. And so we cast a really wide net but we don't catch a lot of fish.
Right.
But when we are able to focus into, this is my specific calling. It's like Nehemiah. This is the wall, the part of the wall that I'm standing
Exactly.
on. And I'm going to guard this part of the wall, while you're going to guard that one, or you're going to do that one. It's so important. That's what mission organizations like Operation Christmas Child, that's why they're so effective at what they're doing. And I think that's why we wanted to give them a platform here on FreeThinking Ministries to say, this is an important thing, but it's also done very well.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So before we cut short, is there anything that we didn't get to that you wanna cover as we've had this conversation?
I think from my perspective, I've tried to focus a lot on reaching pastors in the Omaha area and getting their churches involved with that. And I just would like the pastors that are listening in to realize that, one, we're not looking to put more on their plate, because there's very few pastors I know of that have a 40-hour work week. What we're looking for is just simply the opportunity to share with their congregation, to get them connected with Operation Christmas Child and have them do the ministry in the church, which is really what pastors want. They want to engage their congregation in meaningful ministry, and that's what we want also.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally agree. So anybody listening to this, check out some of the links in the description. We'll get those to you, and make sure, even if you're not a pastor, you can go talk to your pastor about it. Now, sometimes pastors are like, hey, I can't handle this right now because they've got 2 funerals, a wedding, and a sermon to prepare for. Like you said, their work weeks are often 60, 70 hours, not 40. But it's an important conversation to start.
Yes.
It's a ministry that's important. Thank you for taking your time to be here. Thank you for doing the work that you do and for honoring God in it.
Thank you, Josh.
Thank you, Josh. Appreciate it.
All right. That's John and Holly from Operation Christmas Child.
All right, so that was John and Holly. Take a look at all of those things that are going to be in the description. It is a great ministry. But enough of that. Let's move on to our next topic. Well, our next topic is this. Unless you've chosen to take the way of the Benedictine monk, and you've been isolating yourself in the monastic way or whatever, you may have noticed there's been a shift in the way churches speak about cultural things. And the shift isn't just about the mainline denominations. I think it's been happening throughout evangelicalism. Recently, Andy Stanley, a popular evangelical pastor, said this, and I'm going to share my screen here and pull it up. So recently, Andy Stanley said this. Let's give it a listen.
Our diversity is our strength. Our racial diversity, our cultural diversity, our theological diversity, our lived experience diversity is our strength as a local church, because we are to model what the kingdom of God looks like. And it doesn't look just like me, and it doesn't look just like you, and it doesn't sound just like me. So our diversity, the fact that we don't agree politically, culturally, theologically, and yet we can love unconditionally. We are a picture. We are an advertisement of the kingdom of God, when at the end of time, the New Jerusalem comes and the King comes.
Okay, so there he is, speaking about all of the buzzwords: racial diversity, cultural diversity. Now, he all of a sudden switches it into like a diversity of thought, and sometimes that's a good thing. Diversity of theologically core beliefs. I'm not sure that that's a good thing, but the amount of buzzwords and virtue signaling in that short clip is fairly astounding. Now, Andy Stanley, I wrote an entire article on him, and I'll reference it here in a little bit, and you can check it out at our website, freethinkingministries.com. And Russell Moore, they seem to be the poster children for this shift in our culture. In fact, there's also going to be a book coming out. I think it's like The Widening of God's Mercy or something. And that's going to be a big shift as well. So there is a shift, a current and torrential shift in this direction. In 2023, Andy Stanley said this about homosexuality. Yes or no, is homosexuality a sin? I'm not going to answer that. This is Andy Stanley. I'm not going to answer that. I'm not going to answer that question. We have to have new language that creates the potential for a sane, realistic dialogue. Now, what is a sane, realistic dialogue? Should it not be the truth of the scriptures? Now, for those of us paying attention, this shift has been occurring for some time now. I remember listening to David Platt's sermon on Amos 5 and texting a friend during that time that said this was the most eisegetical and awful sermon I've heard for quite some time. And David Platt is a gifted preacher. I feel like he knew what he was doing in that sermon. Then a year later, another pastor, one I'm not going to name because he's not well known, he delivered a very similar sermon on the exact same verse, delivering the same exact topic. This is happening, and it continues to happen. And while some might say, well, what about the right and its influence on the church? And sure, we can talk about that. And I have dogmatic patriotism, country over God, win at all costs rhetoric. There's racist rhetoric on the far right that's seeping into the church as well. Totally get it. But I don't think that is the biggest threat to the church these days. Do you know how I know? Well, because if someone like J.D. Greer, who wrote an entire book on the gospel and is about as conservative as they come, can be led astray for a time because of a theology of enforced empathy, then we have a problem. Now, Greer did apologize for his wording when he said that we shouldn't shout about what the Bible whispers about in reference to sexuality, homosexuality, that is. And I know for a fact that his views on CRT have radically shifted over the last 4 years, not in favor of CRT, by the way. That's critical race theory. However, the fact that he had been flirting with and for a time was taken in by some at least wokish language, if not ideology, while anecdotal, is evidence enough of this drift, I think. About a month ago, a book was released by conservative journalist Megan Basham. The book is called Shepherds for Sale. I wrote a review of Shepherds for Sale. Here it is. Shepherds for Sale. Are shepherds really for sale? Now, Megan Basham, I've got some issues with the book in general, but she does highlight some very, very important things. She works for the Daily Wire, obviously, conservative influence there. She wrote another book about 16 years ago, I think, called Beside Every Successful Man. But this book, Shepherds for Sale, has made the rounds over the last month, and it's a New York Times bestseller. It exposes some really important truths, and I spent weeks reading, researching, and appearing on podcasts concerning this book. I'll post some links in the description. I do want to say I think that I did struggle to elucidate my case very well on Trinity Radio in the Gavlin Ortland situation, but I also think that Gavlin Ortland situation is small potatoes concerning some of the other things in the book that Basham exposes. And I want to be clear, I stand by my critiques of the book in the book review that I offer. And being careful with wording is very important. And Megan has admitted that there are at least moments of poor word choice in her book, but her analysis of what happened with the Trinity Forum, what happened with Christianity Today, her exposure of Andy Stanley either having lack of discernment or outright subversive behavior on theology concerning homosexuality, all very, very important. So too is her personal story of coming to faith and a recognition that if she had gone to a church, and she says this in her book, if she had gone to a church like Andy Stanley's, she likely would never have changed. She wouldn't have experienced the power of the gospel. The gospel is supposed to convict. It's not supposed to confirm what we already feel. And there's been some significant pushback to the book. Neil Shenvi wrote an interesting interview, and I'll post that in the links as well. However, I do think that there's one glaring issue with his review, is that there are times where people try to cover their true agenda with the "but I'm not really" statements. We see it all the time. And that's what makes this hard. Let's take, for example, the Karen Swallow Prior incident in the book. If you've read the book, in the book, she talks about masking. She talks about Karen Swallow Prior. She releases an article during COVID-19 on masking and vaccination. And while Karen Swallow Prior, I'm just going to call her Prior, saying her three names every time is a little bit much. But while Prior explicitly denies that she is making moral equivalency between abortion and passing on a virus unknowingly, I think Basham recognizes that Prior is, in effect, making an equivocation on pro-life as a movement or word. Prior, in her article, does seem to argue that pro-life people should use the same logic in circumstances like COVID-19 restrictions as they do with abortion. But equivocating on a word is not the same as moral equivalency either. However, I think Basham does a good job of highlighting the underhanded tone of Prior, and that it is this tone, the underhanded tone, and the scolding attitude that is meant to drive skeptical Christians to the left on these sort of social issues like COVID-19 vaccines and mask mandates. And that's why, despite its flaws, I think Basham's book is a net positive for the church. Again, maybe you might not read the whole book, but I encourage you, go read my review, go read Neil Shenvi's view. I think it's got some important perspectives. The exposure that Basham makes will force those being enticed by the left to take stock of the situation. For instance, someone like Gavin Ortland, who I deeply respect and disagree completely with on the climate change issue, as I can tell, he's fairly conservative. He could be enticed by scholarly opinions on issues, and I think that if you watch his climate change video, it's clear that he has a high value of scientific experts. And the thing is if COVID taught us anything, it's that sometimes the experts don't tell us the whole truth. And I'm not saying he's wrong, but I will say that being named in a book like this could cause some necessary introspection on some of these topics for some people. At least I hope it would. But likewise, dismantling of Christianity today and of Andy Stanley's influence on evangelicalism is a necessity for the Orthodox Church to fight back, Orthodox little o, to fight back within the culture. So my thoughts on the book are many, and I wrote a 6,000-word review on it, and I'm talking about it again right now. Maybe this will be the last time I talk about it. I don't know. But I want to end this discussion by saying this. Megan, if you're watching this, and I have no reason to think that you will, I know we've had some conversations back and forth, but if you are indeed watching this, I want to invite you on this program to discuss your book, your concerns, and experience some friendly pushback. I think that would be good for the efficacy of the book and for the perception of you as you continue to promote the book. You have done a lot of interviews with people who have not levied hardly any criticisms of the book, and I think it would be good to do an interview with at least one person who has levied, I think, fair criticisms. And, that's obviously I'm tooting my own horn here. That's me. I think I've levied some fairly good critiques of the book. And I'd love to have that conversation. It doesn't have to be me. It could be anyone, but I'd love to offer that. Okay, let's get to our next topic. Before we get to our next topic, I do want to talk about one thing. And that is Mead Ammo. Mead Ammo is a company that is supporting this ministry. Not oftentimes will you find a company that supports an apologetics ministry, but Mead Ammo does that, and they do it in spades. If you want to have ammunition to destroy arguments against the knowledge of God, come to FreeThinking Ministries. If you want ammunition that will not fail you in quick draw competitions or in protecting your family or hunting, visit meadammo.com. That's meadammo.com, and tell them that FreeThinking Ministries sent you. All right, our third topic is Project 2025. Have you heard about Project 2025? If you haven't heard about it, you might be living under a rock, or maybe you're just not politically engaged, which is great. If that's fantastic, you don't need to hear about it. But a few weeks ago, I had a pastor friend of mine ask me a question. He knows what I do. He's conservative. He's likely going to vote for Trump, but he's on the fence, right? And so he asked me this. He said, okay, so tell me about Project 2025. He said he was at the gym and the DNC was on and they kept talking about Trump and Project 2025. And he wanted to know if it was nearly half as bad as they said and what Trump had to do with it. So that led me, yours truly, on a mission. Now, to be clear, I've known about Project 2025 for a long time, and I've mostly ignored it because it's a 900-page document outlining the purpose agenda of a conservative presidency. It's put out by the right-wing think tank, the Heritage Foundation. So you can see why, while I knew about it, maybe I wasn't exactly excited to explore it. Anyway, I read it. Yes, I've almost read all of it. Now, I will confess, I wanted to read all of it before I got to this. I started a couple weeks ago. It's 900 pages. You got to give me some grace. I wasn't able to get all of it down, but I knocked out a significant portion of it. And by the end of this week, I will have read all of it. I already have 20 pages of notes on the 900-page document. So I read it so that you don't have to. So hopefully this is helpful. And hopefully in the near future, I'll be able to release a longer form video covering Project 2025 and how Christians should think of it. But I wanted to get that out there right now. First of all, can I just say how stupid this is? I mean, this is the same, this is controversial. This is the same group that started in 1981 with Ronald Reagan. It has names like Ben Carson, who is not a radical at all, writing in it. It's not some radical group, first of all. So that's the first thing you need to know. Second of all, Trump has certain policies that go directly against Project 25, and no one talks about this. Everyone's linking Trump with Project 2025, and he's running away from it. And I wish he wouldn't run away from it, frankly. And we'll get into that in a little bit and maybe in a longer video. But Project 2025 talks about making pornography illegal. I'm pretty sure we all know that Trump is not going to make pornography federally illegal. Project 2025 wants to federally ban abortion. Trump is on the record saying he would veto such legislation. Now, I disagree with Trump on that. I wish he wouldn't. I wish he would stand firm on those sorts of things and not veto that sort of stuff. But it is what it is. He's run away from it. And now, more on the equivocation of that issue in a little bit. But he's distancing himself from the issue of abortion, and I think it's morally cowardly. He shouldn't do that, and I stand against him in that arena. That said, his goal in this campaign was obviously to take abortion off the table. He wants to do that. He wants to leave it to the states. I think he's doing it in a cowardly way. I think he's trying to be politically expedient. I get it. Anyway, we'll get to that in our main thing, foreshadowing for you as we go forward. So Trump has run screaming away from Project 2025. He's just running away from it. However, he has embraced some other policies, such as eliminating the Department of Education, that are in Project 2025. Well, why would that be the case? Well, because Project 2025 is just a conservative document. That's all it is. That's all it is. And so I'm going to do a longer form video on this, but I want to read two quotes to you first from the book. And then I want to look at an ad that Kamala Harris put out. And then we're going to break it down. And hopefully this will be fun. So first quote from Project 2025 says, "Our goal is to assemble an army of aligned, vetted, trained, and prepared conservatives to go to work on day one to deconstruct the administrative state." All right, quote number 2 is a little bit longer. "It is crucial that all three branches of the federal government respect what Madison called the double security to our liberties, the separation of powers among the three branches, and the separation of powers between the federal government and the states. This double security has been greatly compromised over the years." So keep those things in mind as I share my screen and we watch Kamala Harris's new ad. Let's take a look.
Donald Trump's back, and he's out for control.
I would have every right to go after them.
Complete control.
I will wield that power very aggressively.
And he has a plan to get it.
Detailed plans for exactly what our movement will do.
It's called Project 2025, a 922-page blueprint to make Donald Trump the most powerful president ever. Overhauling the Department of Justice, giving Trump the unchecked power to seek vengeance, eliminating the Department of Education, and defunding K-12 schools, requiring the government to monitor women's pregnancies, and severe cuts to Medicare and Social Security. Donald Trump may try to deny it, but those are Donald Trump's plans.
Well, revenge does take time, I will say that. And sometimes revenge can be justified.
He'll take control. We'll pay the price.
I'm Kamala Harris, and I approve this message.
Yes, of course. Of course, Kamala approves the message, right? Okay, so let's break this ad down. We're going to take a look at these claims one at a time. So the first part of the ad says a 922-page blueprint to make Donald Trump the most powerful president ever. Now, remember that quote that I read from page 21? From page 21, that's very early in the document. Really, does that sound like making him the most powerful president ever? I mean, let's take a look at that. Let's take a look at it again, okay? It says, "It is crucial that all three branches of the federal government respect what Madison called the double security to our liberties, the separation of powers of the three branches." No, it wants to severely limit the executive branch's power. Again, the first quote that I shared, well-trained conservatives to go to work on day one to deconstruct the administrative state. They want to deconstruct the administrative state. So it's completely opposite to make him the most powerful president ever. Second of all, let's get to some specific claims that they make. Overhauling the Department of Justice. So here's the quote that they pull from the video. Congress should unequivocally authorize state and local law enforcement to participate in immigration and border security actions in compliance with Arizona v. United States. Congress should require compliance with immigration detainers to the maximum extent consistent with the 10th Amendment and set financial disincentives for jurisdictions that implement either official or unofficial sanctuary policies. Here's the thing. That's not the Department of Justice section. It's in the Department of Homeland Security. The Department of Homeland Security section is the one that they're talking about there. Okay? So what does overhauling look like? Well, let's take a look. Oh, here's the slide that says Congress should require compliance with immigration detainers to maximally consist with the 10th Amendment and set financially distinctives for jurisdictions and implement either official or unofficial sanctuary policies. Has nothing to do with dismantling the Department of Justice. Here's a quote. It says restoration of the department's values. This is the Department of Justice. Values of independence, impartiality, honesty, integrity, respect, and excellence must serve as first principles for its effort on all fronts. Concretely, the DOJ must identify and address all individuals, policies, and directives that have fueled the destruction of these core values and the American people's loss of trust in the department and its officials. The next administration will need to exert significant energy to dismantle the two-tiered system of justice currently in place at the department while simultaneously applying the rule of law evenly and with neutrality on page 557. Okay, so if we rewind and see what their charge was, it says their charge was overhauling the Department of Justice. And actually, what it outlines is getting the Department of Justice to do what it was designed to do. Page 557. You can go read it for yourself. All right, the next one, giving Trump the unchecked power to seek vengeance. So they quote, here's the quote, they pull out the quote, and control of the president, thinking that he is going to unilaterally take control of the DOJ. But if we take a look at, If we take a look at this quote on page 559, which is where they pull it from, it says, while the supervision of litigation is a DOJ responsibility, the department falls under the direct supervision and control of the President of the United States as a component of the executive branch. Do you understand what they're doing here? All they're doing, now this is about 80% of the document, by the way, is in 2025, Project 2025, is the authors explaining what each individual branch is supposed to do. It's about 80% of the document. It's saying, this is how it started. This is what it's designed to do. This is where it's gone off. This is where there needs to be reformed. That's basically the whole thing. It's literally just explaining. It's just an explanation of what the DOJ is and who it is controlled by in all administrations, not just with Trump, in all administrations. And then next, they say this. It's on page 559. It says the next conservative administration should therefore issue guidance to ensure that litigation decisions are consistent with the president's agenda and the rule of law. The executive using the DOJ as his own personal vengeance machine is against the rule of law. So while it would further the president's agenda, if the president's agenda falls outside of the rule of law, then Project 2025 thinks the DOJ should not follow the president's agenda in that instance. This is in line with all administrations. Okay, this is in line with all administrations. All right, next one, eliminating the Department of Education. Yes, it does do that. It gives many reasons why. I'm not going to upload quotes for all of those, but part of that is that graphs provided on pages 328 and 329, and there's many more, show a rapid decline in the education in our nation, along with what the COVID protocols were doing. So guilty is charged there. He wants to dismantle the Department of Education, which I say good riddance. Good. That's good. Good for him. Defunding K through 12 schools. Nope. The word defund appears 10 times in the whole document, never speaks about K through 12 schools. However, they do talk about moving to more localized funding and school vouchers, if that's what they mean. Obviously, if you dismantle the federal system, you might be dismantling some federal funding, but not much. They talk about moving that federal funding into other categories as well. Requiring the government to monitor women's pregnancies. This is euphemistic nonsense. So no, Project 2025 does not require the government to monitor women's pregnancies. That's not what it's designed to do. Take a look here. Okay. It says on page 455, the CDC should require monitoring and reporting for complications due to abortion. They want to know how many people are dying or getting injured by the abortion industry and how many abortions are occurring. This is such euphemistic nonsense. It's not about pregnancies. it's about abortions. And they don't want to say abortions because people might think, oh, actually, that's kind of reasonable. All right. And then last but not least, severe cuts to Medicare and Social Security. Now, unfortunately, Trump has insisted he wouldn't touch entitlements. And Project 25 merely points out that those systems are leading to solvency sooner rather than later and recognizes the need for restructuring them or getting rid of them altogether. Now, if people knew this little snippet, they might understand where they're coming from. So off of page 283 in Project 2025, it says Medicare and Medicaid combined cost $17.8 trillion, while our combined federal deficits over that time span were $17.9 trillion. In essence, our deficit problem is a Medicare and Medicaid problem. Well, maybe if more people knew that, they would start to go, oh, so we've always talked about how, oh, the United States is in debt. How can we need to figure something out? Well, there's part of the problem. So they're not going to tell you that part, are they? So stay tuned for a further breakdown of Project 2025. I don't think it's actually scary. I think it's actually, I told someone, I think it's pretty milquetoast policy. I mean, saying pornography should be illegal and people participating in it should be imprisoned is pretty based. But other than that, it's pretty much the same that conservatives have been saying for years. So stay tuned for that video and more coming up. So before we get to our main thing, I want to remind you to like, share, and subscribe. But let's talk about what a subscription would be for this channel. According to our analytics, 66% of our viewers are not subscribed. Come on, guys. So hit that subscription. Hit the notification bell as well. Only 80% of our subscribers have the notifications turned on. Turn the notifications on so you won't miss an episode of this show or any other show. We're currently at 6,000 subscribers, so spread the word. And now let's get to our main thing. All right. Our main thing today is, what does it mean to be pro-life? Is it just anti-abortion? Well, in 1973, Roe versus Wade was passed in the Supreme Court. And what would be one of the most despicable decisions in Supreme Court history. Since 1973, there have been nearly 65 million elective abortions reported in the United States. For reference, according to the Black Book of Communism, communism has killed 94 million people. Nazi Germany only I can't believe I just said it, only killed 6 million Jews. This is why the pro-life movement is so important and why, after 50 years, Roe was overturned and celebrated by the pro-life movement. But we weren't done. That wasn't supposed to be the ending. That was just the beginning of the fight. Now, recent comments by former President Trump infuriated people like myself, at least, when he said his administration would be great for women's reproductive rights. This is commonly used as a euphemism for abortion in pro-choice circles, pro-abortion circles. And then to make matters worse, J.D. Vance, his vice president nominee, insisted that Trump would veto any legislation that federally outlawed the practice of abortion. Now, here's the thing. I understand that in part, politics is politics and political expediency must be factored into the equation. I get that. I get what politics is doing. I actually even understand what Trump is doing. I hate it. I understand what he's doing, trying to remove abortion as a central talking point because it's the only consistent talking point that Kamala Harris ever has. She's flip-flopped on every position except for abortion. Donald Trump trying to take that off of the table. But here's the thing. Donald, you're not going to get pro-choice people to vote for you. It's not going to happen. So just double down. Drives me nuts. Anyway, the culture has a death grip on this death work. And so he's trying to distance himself from it. And I kind of get it, but I think it's morally abhorrent and cowardice. Okay. So for those of us who are plugging our nose and voting for the former president, it was a slap in the face. And we should say as much. We should stand up. If we're going to vote for him, we should be the loudest people to stand up and say, this is wrong. This is not right. This is not why we voted for you. Lila Rose, who's a pro-life activist, has been excoriated by people from the right on her anger towards Trump and this administration for betraying the pro-life movement. And I get that people are afraid Trump's going to lose, but getting mad at people for calling Trump to account when he is clearly playing into the pro-choice verbiage is absolutely unacceptable. Now, on the other hand, never Trumpers are coming out of the word work with gleeful I told you so bravado, saying things like, oh, never Trumpism is vindicated, or see, there's no real pro-life party. But these dunks, to me, they ring hollow. You people traded your pro-life cards in 2016 when you refused to vote for Donald Trump and risked Hillary Clinton installing the most pro-abortion and radical leftist agenda in modern American history. Now, the response is usually this, and this is a response I got from somebody on Twitter, and then he deleted the response, but the response is usually this: well, other conservative candidates would have installed similar judges to overturn Roe versus Wade. And I agree, but that's not what Never Trump was about, was it? If that was the case, it wouldn't be Never Trump. It would be, as I was, Never Trump in the primaries. I have never voted for Donald Trump in a primary. In fact, this year I wrote Ron DeSantis in the Republican primary because I didn't want to vote for Trump in the primary. But your argument, the Never Trump people argument, wasn't simply that another conservative should have been the candidate. I get that one. That was my argument too. Your argument was that Trump would be worse, than Hillary Clinton, and that was objectively false. Objectively false. To save your meaningless victory laps, please, especially those of you who choose to vote for and encourage others to vote for Kamala Harris. We are not the same. I am forced into this untenable position. You chose it. You chose pro-abortion rather than simply pro-states on the issue. You support someone that wants to federalize Roe into law and overturn state laws on the issue. We are not the same. And I am an abortion abolitionist, but I'm also trying to be as practical as possible. I understand how impossible abolition is if we let the federal government reinstate Roe as the law of the land for all 50 states. I don't want that to happen. I understand people who cannot bring themselves to vote for Trump. I get it. Maybe because of this betrayal, maybe for other reasons. I get that. In a lot of ways, I resonate with them. I don't agree with them, but I resonate with them. I don't think that they are sinning if they refuse to vote for Trump or vote for third party. Tim Stratton and I have differences of opinion on this issue. I don't think that's the case. Although I have said, if you're in a swing state, I think you have to be very, very careful in how you calculate that decision. But I do believe that people are, if they actively vote for and encourage voting for Kamala Harris to stop Trump from winning. So yes, there are two calculations to make here in my mind. The first is what the pro-life movement wants to accomplish, and the second is what it can accomplish. And I write as much in my pro-life incrementalism article that will be posted in the description below. So even after all of this, I have supposedly pro-life people, mostly the ones voting for Kamala Harris, telling people to vote for Kamala Harris, telling me things like, look, abortion rates didn't go down. In fact, they went up after Roe was appealed. So maybe we should vote to keep it legal so we can fight to simply lessen abortion, since making it illegal doesn't seem to work. I've heard this so often. It is very, very frustrating to have to listen to this. I've heard it so often. And in fact, a few years ago, there's a well-known person from the right, or at least from Christian circles, named Phil Vischer, who did VeggieTales, and he released a video. It's pretty ironic because he released this video. You can see it there. Now, I reviewed this video a little bit on Facebook. Maybe I should do it again here on YouTube and go back to it. But he released this video talking about how, pro-life presidents haven't overturned Roe in so many years. You know, what's ironic is less than 2 years after that video, the justices that Donald Trump got on the Supreme Court overturned Roe. And so his argument kind of blew up on itself. So I discussed that even with a friend online, and I've seen this argument making the rounds again. Well, the pro-life people, if they're really just for less abortions, they should just let it be legal and then fight the good fight that makes it for less abortions. I had a friend, and I discussed this on Facebook recently, that the two seem to be mutually exclusive. You can either have less abortions or you can make abortion illegal. In fact, a well-known progressive on Twitter named Mason, I don't remember his, I don't know quite how you pronounce his last name, Meninga, I think, said, if the goal of the pro-life movement was to reduce abortions, it would support policies that have been proven to reduce abortions, but it's simply about criminalizing people who get abortions. So this is this moral, if you were really pro-life, you would just support policies that would limit abortion. So we had this conversation. I said the pro-life movement isn't about making is about making all forms of murder illegal. So he says, you're admitting the point isn't about reducing and criminalizing. I'm saying it's a both and. You want to do both. He says the problem is reducing it and making it illegal are incompatible. And he's using the example of that was recently found out that over 1 million abortions occurred still, even though Roe is overturned, and there are these other laws. So they're incompatible because for a year now, Roe's been overturned, and in that year, we've seen abortions increase. Now, let me tell you, that's frustrating and difficult to stomach as a pro-life person, but that is not a good argument. That is not a good argument, and I'll tell you why. Okay, it's a false dilemma, and it operates under the assumption that a law is only just if it completely eradicates or lessens a behavior. This is untrue. It is almost the same exact argument that pro-trans activists use when they say, would you rather have a dead daughter or a living son, when they're talking about transition of kids. It's a manipulative argument to get you to be on the defensive rather than to be proactive in it. As if transition was actually real when they say that too, right? So I've had multiple people bring this argument up to me recently, so I want to shift from the political expedience of it to the pro-life argument for it, to say, how do we respond to this objection? This objection and the idea that real pro-life people would vote for Harris in this election is not only untenable, but morally wrong. So somebody from the American Solidarity Party recently wrote this on Facebook, and I've got another overlay here. They recently wrote this. But I want to suggest that if you live in a purple state and if you're pro-life and not merely anti-abortion, then Harris Walz should be your choice in November. Okay. And then they went on to say in the same post, abortions have hardly decreased post-Roe. They've merely shifted to locations. The most consistent and reliable way to decrease abortions is by providing the socioeconomic support necessary to maintain the health and well-being of pregnant people and families. Pregnant people. How about pregnant women? How about that? Can we say that? Kamala and Tim have consistently and reliably championed such policies, and there's no reason to think that they will not continue to do so at the federal level. There's a big reason. There's a big reason, because they're pro-abortion. They don't simply. It's not that they even want to see abortion go away. They want to see more abortions. They're fine with it. But this is despicable reasoning. Even if it was the case, this is horrible reasoning. The idea that being pro-life rather than simply being anti-abortion is a thing is in and of itself a smokescreen for progressive ideology. There is no way to be pro-life without being anti-abortion. It does not exist. You cannot be pro-life without being anti-abortion. Furthermore, the policies put forth by Kamala and Walz will most certainly not be better for life. I've covered that on another podcast. We'll have something coming out soon. What she means in this scenario is that the socialist programs that seek to wage a war on poverty is the best way to limit abortions, because then mothers feel like they can afford to take care of their kids instead of, murdering them. So let's take a look at the logic behind this argument using a few examples, okay? What if I said to you, well, genocide shouldn't be illegal since it's become illegal. It's not really radically changed. It's just shifted locations. There's just genocide happening in different areas in the world. Now, is that an argument for keeping genocide legal? As long as we can keep, genocide to an acceptable level, why make it illegal? We could do programs where we can separate people so that there's less genocide. I don't think that would be a just law. I don't think anybody would like that. So, or here's a more apt comparison. The Emancipation Proclamation was made in 1863. The Civil War concluded in 1865, and slavery was officially abolished in the United States shortly thereafter. But what if I told you that currently in the United States, according to the Global Slavery Index, we have about 1,091,000 slaves in our country? Now, you might be surprised that that's the case. Probably a lot of people are. But that doesn't make it false. In fact, that's true. We have 1 million. In fact, we have more slavery in the world now than at any time in world history. So what if I told you that the total amount of slaves in the year 1800 was only 1 million? So it's gone up 91,000 since 1800. It's also true. Well, that would indicate what? That so long as we can keep slavery to a certain threshold, since we have more slaves now than we did in 1800, it's acceptable? And you go, well, you know, we had millions of slaves eventually. Well, that's true. That's true. And we made it illegal, and then the numbers went down. Perhaps we should experiment with making slavery legal so we could maybe lessen it. Maybe if we made it legal now, there would be less slaves. What if someone had that argument in 1850? You know, the best way to mitigate slavery is to give people subsidies so that they don't have to own slaves. Would that have been good, even if it worked? Or do we see slavery as morally reprehensible and something that ought to be illegal and be punished for if you commit slavery, if you buy a person, if you use them to your own gain, if you consider them property? Should slavery only be illegal if the illegality of slavery limits the number of people enslaved? Or should slavery be illegal because it is a moral evil and any just society should make it illegal? Any just society, any society that makes it legal is unjust, regardless of if slavery shifts locations or not. And some could argue, well, slavery's just shifted locations. I mean, there's more slaves in the world now than there's ever been. Really, it's just shifted locations. Shouldn't we make U.S. slavery legal again? Because then at least the slaves here, they would have a better life. I mean, think about the slaves in other places. In fact, slaves here could have better manufacturing conditions. We could bring manufacturing jobs back from China, and China would not have slave labor anymore. We'd have more slaves here. They'd have less slaves. Wouldn't that be more just? Perhaps we could even limit slavery in other countries by instituting slavery ourselves, you know, just like I'm saying there. Now, are you pro-human rights? Are you pro-human rights, or are you just simply anti-slavery? Now, I'm being kind of snarky. I'm sorry, but it infuriates me. It frustrates me that this is a line of argumentation. Of course, the pro-life person wants to limit abortions. Of course, every life lost to an abortion is a tragedy and unjust and a horrible blight on the history and the moral structure of this nation. Of course, God is going to judge us harshly for what we've done to the least of these. Many, many, many people will have that millstone. Of course, it's devastating that the abortion pill is so widely available and is able to be transported and shipped across state lines, even though medication isn't supposed to be able to be shipped across state lines. Of course, all of that. But that doesn't mean we stop. It means we shift strategies. The idea that just because abortions went up this last year, which is awful, means we should throw up our hands and say, well, you know what? Abortion was going down, even though it was still 800,000 abortions a year. Abortion was going down at least before Roe was overturned. So we might as well just go back to that. No, we just got to shift strategies. This is a new fight. We're barely in it. We can't give up. So number one, the target should be the abortion pill. It needs to be eradicated, or at least initially, the ability to transport it across state lines should be eradicated. Number two is target federal legislation. It's frustrating that Donald Trump is not going to sign federal legislation. Number three, local legislation. As long as we can keep Harris out of the White House, where she has promised to make Roe the law of the land, which would overturn a bunch of pro-life laws in the states. No one ever talks about that. Federally, it would overturn all of them. It would supersede all of them. So if she isn't able to do that, we can fight at the local level. In Nebraska, where I'm at, we're fighting. We're fighting to make not just abortion unthinkable, but to make it illegal. And number four, Supreme Court appeals based on personhood pursuant of the 14th Amendment. Is a baby a person? Is an unborn child, a preborn child, a person? If so, then the 14th Amendment applies and you can't kill it. So even if it were provable, even if it were true that abortion doesn't decrease with illegality, a dubious proposition at best, considering we have 1 year of data suggesting that. And this Mason guy, he said, do you think abortions weren't happening before Roe? They were happening, But after Roe, there was a spike in abortions. You can look at the statistics, a spike, because it was legal. So we don't actually have enough data through enough years to make this proclamation that, oh, the two are untenable. We can't pursue either of them. We need to pursue just, mitigating murder. We need to find an acceptable level of murder so that we can feel good. And we just need to kind of pushing that acceptable level down. Or how about this? We should pursue all murder being illegal. So, for instance, if the pro-life position was only to limit abortions, as if a certain amount of murder being illegal to keep other murders from happening would be okay, then we could do the purge, right? Yeah, you ever seen the purge? It's like, oh, all crime is legal for one night. Maybe we should do that. Then murder statistics would probably fall because at least some murders would be illegal. It's disgusting. Murder should be illegal. Full stop. Finally, the other reason this argument fails is precisely because the other side is not content with the laws that are in place either. If abortion access is so available and the rates are going up so fast, and that even though it's illegal, the two aren't compatible, then why do you want a federal abortion law so bad? Why institute Roe as the law of the land? And don't tell me because you want less abortions, because that has never, as far as I know, been Harris's or any other pro-abortionist advocate's statement. I've never heard any of them say, let's make abortion legal so there will be less of them. What you're asking conservatives to do here, what you're asking us to do is accept the premise of safe, legal, and rare. Saying, why don't you just go back to that? And I get that kind of is Donald Trump's thing, because Donald Trump is a 90s Democrat and he's moving the he's moving the Republican Party into 90s Democrat land. But that's not where I'm moving. I'm not going to move there. Just because I vote for that man, because the alternative is so much worse, doesn't mean that I'm going to move with him there. So I've only heard this argument in order to get pro-lifers to compromise or to get people to soften their consciences so that they can excuse voting for a baby murdering group like the DNC. And people might get mad for the way I'm saying, well, this is divisive. This isn't Christian. This is Christian. Jesus said, it is better for a millstone to be tied around someone's neck than to lead one of these little ones astray. I don't want that millstone. So I'm going to stand up and I'm going to say it. We know that these statistics won't keep this way for long. That's why the argument's being made right now. That's why people are saying, oh, vote for Kamala Harris and Walz because, you could limit abortions that way, because they know as states will start to institute laws, as the pro-life movement will gain its footing again, that the abortion pill will start to be illegal to cross state lines, that they know the pro-life movement will keep pushing, and that years down the road, abortions will lessen and laws will become more just because it's illegal. How do I know this? Well, in the half year following the Roe decision, before there was a concerted effort to push and produce the abortion pill nationwide, regardless of state lines, abortion went down by over 30,000 babies in the state of Texas alone. Look, to be pro-life is to be anti-abortion. And to be a Christian ought to be pro-life. We cannot equivocate on this issue. We cannot equivocate on this issue. Be pro-life and anti-abortion. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. And that's for our show for today. God bless. And as always, stay reasonable.